I was a refugee in Sudan.
It kind of sounds like science fiction.
It is not fiction. It is happening right now, and a Ugandan is involved. So it is not beyond us. I'm working at the Griffin Institute. I grew up in the Moyo. We had the war of 1979 going to 80. I was studying in Koboko Secondary School. We fled to Southern Sudan. I ended up in Europe. I had an option to go to study either in Canada or the UK. I thought to myself, yeah, after this, I'll go back to Uganda. I wanted to be a medical doctor. So I fled to Sudan, went to Italy. So the idea was, let's go to Uganda and let's see how long we'll do it. So my wife is Irish, but from Northern Ireland. Because 15 years ago in Uganda, I was already working on that. East Africa was many, many years ahead of Europe. We may be poor in terms of resources, but we're not poor in terms of ideas. And I call myself a cultural polygamist. But if you can, invest in another home at home, as home Uganda. Makerere was the origin, but Makerere has spread its wings far and wide. Makerere has got a currency, and we should use that well. There are certain things that happen, they are never planned. But you know what? In the end, they change the course of your journey.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sisi if you're new here, and today I have for you Dr. Ferdinand Lali, who is a Ugandan medical research scientist working in the UK, but he also works in Uganda sometimes. He has a background in immunology, biochemistry, host-pathogen interactions, neglected tropical diseases, and all kinds of complicated things that we're going to hear more about today. And I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so sorry for the background noise here, but I'll always mute myself. So I thought you'd start by telling us about what is your field exactly. It sounds a bit complicated. What does it mean? If someone is hearing it for the first time, what does your work really mean?
So thank you, Sisi. I'll start by telling you what I do now, and then I go backwards. And as far as we have time, the moment what I work on is mainly classed as tissue regeneration. Now, tissue regeneration is when you've got an injury on any part of your body. It can be on the skin, be injury that arises from, let's say, a surgical intervention. So all of those things require that the part of your body that has been injured or disrupted reconstructs itself and regenerates itself. So what I work on is tissue regeneration. But actually the way in which the layman encounters tissue regeneration is usually where you've got situations where you've got a non-healing wound. You've got an ulcer. And many people with diabetes have got that situation. You've got diabetic ulcers, you've got venous ulcers, and you've got pressure ulcers. You've got many of those kind of situations in which the wound does not heal well, including actually after a burn. You've got burn wounds that don't heal. Trying to help a body heal from an injury, which is a wound, is all important. So my entire career today is about wound healing. But when I say wound healing, I mean tissue regeneration in all parts of the body, because sometimes wounds heal in the wrong way. Either they don't heal or they overheal. When they overheal, you've got situations where the scar that is formed becomes something like a keloid. Or in the internal components of the body, you have things which are called adhesion. And surgeons will understand that very well. So the complications of wound of healing from non-healing wounds, ulcers on the surface of the skin, right through to adhesions in the internal organs of the body are complications of healing that we have to deal with. So my job in tissue regeneration has to deal with that entire spectrum of how the tissues of the body, once injured, do not heal and regenerate properly. That is what I do.
Thank you for that detailed explanation. It sounds also things like you've mentioned, keloids, hypertrophic scars. I remember a lot of, from a long time ago in my medical school, such things. So do you work clinically or just in the research?
So what we do is this. The first thing we tend to concentrate on the non-healing wound. So when the wound is not healing, and usually a wound is described as tissue that has been lost and has not regenerated. So one of the main things we struggle and try to do is restore that volume of tissue that has been lost. And on the skin, we generally talk about the granulation tissue. Granulation tissue is that early part of the wound that fills what you have lost and gradually becomes what you need. Okay. So in doing that, we do a lot of things. We put a lot of biomaterials that can be of like synthetic origin, or sometimes we actually use biomaterials of biological origin. One of the studies we're doing at the moment in my research institute is we take the skin of pigs. The pigs are very close to humans in their skin. So we use the skin of pig and then we remove all the cellular components, because you know that when you try to transplant tissue, the greatest the greatest limitation is compatibility. So you can't take skin from Sisi to Fedi because Sisi is not related to Fedi. Sisi is not an identical twin. So Sisi's skin cannot go into Fedi's skin. For those reasons, we remove all the cellular components. The things that make the body reject an implant is a lot of the things that are on the cell. Because the cell is the thing that makes the body reject tissue from another person, we remove all the cellular components. So what we do is we decellularize the dermis. So we take skin, we remove all the cells from it, but what is left is actually a scaffold which is a framework on which cells are familiar. They sit there, they grow there, they repopulate and regenerate the skin. So what we do is we take skin from pigs, we decellularize it, we put it back into a pig that we have wounded, and then we see how well that skin will heal. So that is one of the things we do. That is actually quite a good example of the things we do. We have very many variations of the way we do it, but that is a very good example of what we do. But in humans, the example to give is that if I took a skin from you, I decellularize it and I use it to heal skin on my body, there's a very good chance the skin will heal and not reject it. But if I took your heart, God forbid, at post-mortem, or if somebody gave me a donor heart, there's a very big problem with compatibility. It is rejected because you are not me. My body will reject you. For all of those reasons, we are actually happier in tissue regeneration where you decellularize part of that body, the tissue that you want to reconstruct, and it should work. There is a set extra added aspect to it, which I'll talk about in detail later on if we've got time. But usually, once you decellularize, the tissue is okay to go into another body that is within the same species. But if it is a cross species is a different question. And if you ask me, I will talk about that later.
Wow, it kind of sounds like science fiction.
It is not fiction. It is happening right now. And a Ugandan is involved. So it is not beyond us.
So can you tell us more about like what research that you're doing? You said you're doing it at your research institute. Where is your research institute now?
I'm working at the Griffin Institute. So the Griffin Institute is situated in Northwick Park Hospital in Harrow, in London, UK. And the Griffin Institute is incorporated legally as the Northwick Park Institute for Medical Research. So the Griffin Institute is our trading name, but Northwick Park Institute for Medical Research is the name in which we're incorporated. So what we do there is twofold. I'm in the research and development department, R&D. We do this kind of research. We ask questions, and if we think we have an answer, we put it into the next step. Because what we do in science, and especially in medicine, is you start with R&D. And if you think you got a very good idea, you put it in preclinical studies. These are in vivo studies. And for those of us who work on wound healing, the key model for wound healing is the best. So that is the preclinical study. But if it works well, and you do a lot of study, we call them GLP study. You do that study to make sure that this thing is safe to go to the next step. Most people actually also add the step that they want to know that it has efficacy, that it actually works. But GLP initially, primarily, is about the safety of that component. Once you do that in an animal, you move on to the next step. You do clinical studies. The clinical studies will be in humans, and you want to find that it is safe in humans as well, and it is efficacious. So you go through all of those steps. So what I do at the moment is tissue regeneration. And when you talk about tissue regeneration, you are not talking just about wound healing. You're talking about the possibility of heart replacement, kidney replacement. All of those things fall within tissue regeneration. So if you get it right in what you do on the skin, you have got lessons for people who are looking to give somebody a kidney transplant, a heart transplant. Now, something that is really, really important that I should mention is this. Many people know, why can we not transplant a pig heart, pig kidney to humans? There's a primary thing that regulates that, just like blood compatibility. So you have to have a compatible blood type to be able to donate to somebody who's the recipient. In the same way, there are carbohydrates in different species. Some species have it, some species don't. And we are, unfortunately, in the situation where pigs have carbohydrates that we don't have. As a result, we react badly to them. So the research institute that work on using pigs as the possibility of transplant for humans actually work on that carbohydrate. They make those pigs deficient in that carbohydrate. They knock that gene out. So that is one of the areas where tissue transplantation is very, very advanced, because you have to be a step ahead. You have to be sure that just as blood compatibility is screened before you get blood from anybody, tissue compatibility is screened. And that is one thing that is a limitation. Recently, there was a case in America where somebody got a big heart, and within 2 months, I think he passed away. The important thing is this: you may do that to make the tissue compatible, but you can also use immunosuppressant. Just as between humans, you may have a tissue transplant that is incompatible, you need immune suppressants for that body to accept it. But the problem with immune suppressants is that you immune suppress that patient to the point that they cannot fight normal, ordinary infections. So the best transplant is where you have a compatible tissue. So if in future we're going to get tissue from pigs, we have to have pigs that are immune compatible to us.
That sounds amazing. Like, I'd never heard that there was someone out there who was given a pig's heart and they
Yeah.
live. That is news to me. If you knew
Yeah.
about this, let us know in the comments. Is this news to you too?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us, how did you come to this point? Like, how did you come into this field? What's your history like? Where were you born? Were you
Yeah.
born okay? How did you end up there in London?
See,
People
see,
want.
it's a very, I don't know whether it's very Ugandan or very African, but I don't think we can distinguish between that. You know what? I grew up in the Moyo, in northwest of Uganda, very close to the South Sudan border. In the past, it was Sudan, but now it is South Sudan. So I grew up there, and I heard a lot, but never saw anything of Kampala. I grew up there, and when we had the war of 1979 going to 80, I was studying in Koboko Secondary School. We fled to Southern Sudan. I ended up in Europe. I studied in Trieste in Italy for 2 years. And then I was actually luckily I had an option to go to study either in Canada or the UK. And you know what? The Canada option was you go and settle there and all of those things. But the option in UK was the years of your education and you're done. The money was there. So I opted to study in the UK. I did a first degree in combined biochemistry and pharmacology. And you know what? I thought to myself, yeah, after this, I'll go back to Uganda. When I finished, war was raging in Southern Sudan because my family was in Southern Sudan at that time. This was 1989, thereabouts. So war was raging in Southern Sudan. And my family, that was who were refugees in Southern Sudan, were fleeing back to Uganda. Now you think about it. And fortunately, the university union had a lot of scholarships for people who had difficulties in their country. And at that time, immediately after I actually got that scholarship, I found a lot of Chinese at the time of Tiananmen Square got similar scholarships. So I stayed in Leeds University. I did a degree, a master's degree in clinical biochemistry, because I felt that is the degree that will launch me when I go back to Uganda. Because if we had not had all those wars, and if I had not fled our beloved country, I wanted to be a medical doctor. That was not to be. So I fled to Sudan, went to Italy for my A levels in an international school, came to Leeds, did my 3 years in biochemistry and pharmacology. Now, given the option and the opportunity, I did a master's in clinical biochemistry. And I thought, after this, I'm going back to Uganda. But actually, that was exactly 1991, thereabout. That was the time when Ugandans who were living in Southern Sudan were fleeing back to Uganda, where they ran from. Now, I don't know. You might have a good word for it, but I don't know how that feels in the minds of people they're not immigrants, they're refugees. So these days we mix those words a lot, but we were in a very difficult situation. The answer to the confusion in my mind was I applied for residency in UK and I asked for refugee status in UK. I was a refugee in Sudan. I traveled and studied in Europe as a refugee from Sudan. So I asked them to extend my refugee status. And what they did was They gave me exceptional leave to remain. That is something that the UK did very well. I think it lasts up to, I can't remember, it could be up to 4 years. But usually they give you that. It means they're happy for you to stay, but they don't recognize your status as such. And I went on. And the good thing that happened was, of course, within a few years, I met a girl from Ireland, and we felt like we were close enough. And I got married. And that's actually how the rest of my time in the UK started. So I'm married to a married girl. For most of the people that live the sort of life you and I probably live, there are certain things that happen. They are never planned. But you know what? In the end, they change the course of your journey. So when I did that, I was living up in Leeds because I did my first degree in Leeds, my second degree in Leeds. So and then I came down to London. I worked for Barras Wellcome, which is the famous Wellcome. And after 2 years, I went to work for another research institute called Kennedy Institute of Rheumatology. It is the institute where anti-TNF was discovered and, and used as a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis that's now worldwide accepted. In those early years, I was still a research assistant. I'd done a first degree, second degree, but I was still a research assistant. So I thought, you know what? I want to do a PhD. So the institute actually gave me the opportunity. So I did my PhD at the Kennedy Institute, which then became part of Imperial College. So I did my PhD in immunology at Imperial College. And after that, uh, the first thing I did was my wife and I would already had 3 kids going into school. We decided, you know what, the children should know Uganda. So we went to Uganda. But when we went to Uganda, the good thing is my wife taught at Kabera, and then I taught at Makerere. So I was a lecturer in Makerere.
So you went and you lived there for some time.
Yeah, I went a little earlier, but from 2004 to 2008, I was in Makerere teaching in biochemistry. My wife was teaching in Kabera. The interesting thing is this: I taught in Makerere, but much as I was a biochemistry lecturer, biochemistry served another two other departments. Makerere biochemistry taught veterinary school, and it taught in the medical school. So I was one of those people in those early years who did so-called problem-based learning in the Mulago. But of course, the veterinary school kept to the standard. So I was in between. I was balancing a lot of things. My experience in the UK, my experience in Uganda. But one of the things I'm very proud of is that innovation is a good thing, but we must always learn whether we've got it right. And in the end, I'm not so sure. I wasn't there by the time somebody came to the seat to say yes or no about problem-based learning. Problem-based learning is a wonderful thing for any clinician from around the third year of medical school. But from very early on, as first year, I must be honest to you, I'm not so sure. Because one of the questions I've always asked my students in Molag, in the medical school is, when you applied to come to Makerere, did you know about PBL, which is problem-based learning? Most of them didn't know. And this is something that I should share with you, because Makerere has a huge reputation. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Makerere has a huge reputation. If anybody wants to go anywhere in Uganda, they want to go to Makerere. Fine. But you realize in the 2000s, in those years from 2000 to the 2000s, let me put it as a bracket, there was an explosion of those new universities in Uganda, both government funded and the private. I give you a very good example. Mbarara is a wonderful university, I believe, from what I've heard. I've never been there, but the things I hear about Mbarara make me proud of Mbarara. Gulu University. Gulu University is a university I nearly ended up working at, because when I started in Uganda around 2003-4, I talked to the people who were the managers of Gulu University then. I wanted to go and teach there, but our family situation was that I couldn't go there. So I would want the same for Gulu as I think on Barada. There are wonderful universities that are coming up in Uganda. And the thing is this, we don't have to have too many universities. No, God forbid that. We have to have good universities. So I'm very proud of Barada. I'm very proud of Gulu. And I'm very proud of Moni because Moni is the first vice chancellor of Muni University. He was a very good friend of mine, the late Professor Christine Drajon. We talked a lot about her journey from Makerere to Muni. And she asked me, with my friends in biochemistry, to help her construct a curriculum for the sciences. And the other thing I'm going to say to you is this. Actually, not only was it good, think of Busitema. In Busitema, when I first went to Makerere, I was given a house in that university, the university residence. When I was given the key to my house, they called it Ex Aquacol. Ex Aquacol is the house where Aquacol used to live. Professor Aquacol is now in Busitema. And the vice chancellor in Busitema now is Paul Wako. I know him. He was in pharmacology in Makerere. So Makerere has actually bred the resurgence or the existence, the spread of new universities in Uganda. That's a wonderful thing for Makerere. And the thing is this, Makerere is full of politics, but we should not let the politics kill the great good Makerere has done, not only to Uganda, but to the region. So I look at Busitema, the people who led it are Makerere. I look at Gulu University, the people who led it are Makerere. I look at Moni, the people who led it are Makerere. And then we have Makerere, the people who still have a lot to offer. They should ask themselves, what else can we do? I'll tell you another story, Sisi. I went to Mass one day, I can't remember which year, at Christ the King. And at the end of the service, the Reverend invited a member of the congregation to greet people who were at Mass. And who was this person? They invited Mkapa. Mkapa, the former president of Tanzania. And do you know what he talked about? He reminisced about his Makerere education. Mkapa, the former president of Tanzania, when invited at the Christ the King to greet the congregation, he reminisced about his Makerere education. That says a lot of things about Makerere. But the thing is this, now today, you and I, here in UK, we look back. Makerere was the origin, but Makerere has spread its wings far and wide. What we should do is we should strengthen all the arms of the education that Makerere has extended itself to, because it's not only Makerere. Everybody cannot go to Makerere, but go everywhere. Makerere has an influence. And the other thing I would say is this. I think very proudly about the new universities. I mentioned Barada. I didn't mention KIU. KIU, people, my last visit home, people say wonderful things about KIU. And the thing is this, the people in the region of East Africa come to study in Uganda, whichever university, because of the currency of Makerere. Makerere has got a currency, and we should use that well. And if the government is listening, they must really invest in that currency of Makerere, and by extension to all those government and private universities that have been formed over the last 20 years or so. And that is actually the kind of story that I want us to share.
That's so interesting. I feel like, because I was also a PBL product, and I just missed you because I started medical school in 2010 when you had stopped.
Oh, yeah, I left in 2008, yeah.
Yes, I think we're one of the last years of PBL, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it. If you did PBL, comment below, let us know. I think Makerere is a really good university. Yeah. And yeah, I'm so happy about like how far we have come, all of us Makerere people. So what about, because you said you went to Uganda for only those years. So then does that mean that you came back after 2008 to the UK? What happened?
Yeah, so what happened was actually the whole idea about going to Uganda was really to give our young children an experience of Uganda. It is for all parents, you just want your children to be familiar with your own background. So the idea was, let's go to Uganda and let's see how long we'll wait. We went in 2004 and we didn't last more beyond 2008. Okay.
How old are your kids?
Oh, now the youngest has just graduated from Imperial College. He's a biomedical scientist.
Like you?
Yes. And the thing is, yeah, our eldest she's actually she's a medical doctor. She works in Scotland. So we got 4 kids. Yeah. And the thing is this, actually, so for us, going to Uganda was a lot to do with the children, not my wife and I. I mean, I could have lived with my wife without going to Uganda because between the couple, do what you want. But I think the children needed that bread because over time, their life may be informed by various things, so you don't want to limit their choices. So we needed to be at home for a certain period of time. So we did that. I don't know whether we did it well. It's difficult to be certain in your mind that you've done it well in terms of the duration or exposure. Because even when we were in Uganda, we were in Kampala. Should we have been in the village? So you don't know those things, but at least we gave it a shot.
No, that's amazing. I wish I could do that, but my husband is not interested at the moment. I don't see how he would agree. You said
Why?
you
Maybe I can advise him. Why do you think he's not interested?
well, I think because we are so fresh here, so he has that feeling of where would we go back to suffer?
No,
there's
seriously,
that
seriously,
feeling.
it is a very difficult decision because I can tell you this. I remember
Mm.
we went to Uganda 1 year because we thought we were never going to go to Uganda the way in which we were planning. We went to Uganda just to say, let the family see all of these children because these children are not going to come here. That visit triggered in my wife the certainty in her mind that actually she can get a job here and we can live here. So when we went there, because we didn't think we were going to live in Uganda, my wife realized we could live there. And that's how we went. So you never know. Never put it. Never put too harsh a line in the sand about whether you're going to go or not. And the other thing is these days, actually, what I realize is because of Zoom, there's a lot of things we can do. My own mom, she had a stroke 4 years ago, and every time I travel, it's a fun travel. Every morning, Zoom in, and I
Yeah.
speak to her. Much
Yeah.
as her speech is impaired, but I still speak to her. So we have got other opportunities which should not be.
I think it's also really important to expose your kids to at least Uganda because as they grow up, there's that identity crisis that comes up, I think,
Yeah.
where someone wonders, are they more Black British? Are they Ugandan? Where do they fall? I've made another video with someone called Jan Muchibi, who is a Ugandan who
Mm.
grew up here, but she has so much love for Uganda. So I'll link a video up here so you can go and check it out if you haven't watched it. And then you said your wife was Irish,
Yeah.
right? So that's even more interesting that for her, when she went, she was able to find that she loves it and she was able to stay. So, what was your experience now when you came back to the UK?
Coming back to UK was easy, and coming back to UK was also partly family reason because there was events in her family, lots of in-laws and things like that, and she felt it would be better if we were still back in UK. So my wife is Irish, but from Northern Ireland. So when she came back, with the kids actually way before me. I said I got a project in Makerere. I'm finishing this project before I go because this money was given in my name. I'm not going to impairing that. So my wife came back with the kids before me, and 1 year after that, I came back, and then we agreed and went back and came back to London because Northern Ireland is like one hour flight away. But the other really interesting thing I have to tell you about me and Ireland is this: it starts from being married to an Irish woman, but Uganda should be proud of research. I give you three very good examples. I start with Burkitt's lymphoma. Burkitt's lymphoma is a cancer that was described in young people initially in northern Uganda.
Yes, I remember
But
that.
Burkitt is a one-eyed Irishman who, for some funny reason, after this, he trained in Ireland, he worked in the war corps, I think, in the Second World War. Then he ended up in Uganda. And up to, I think, 1964, he was still in Uganda. He was one of the people he was the person who actually described Burkitt's lymphoma. That is why we call it Burkitt's lymphoma. And one of the other things this guy did was he was one of the first people to describe the association between fiber in your diet and colorectal cancer. Uganda has to be proud and remember that these are scientific discoveries that we can affiliate ourselves. The next thing I will talk to you about is two diseases. I've got two other diseases that ring highly. The other one is sleeping sickness. Now, when I was in Makerere, the reason why I got very interested, very close with our veterinary fraternity, there's a lot of very good research done in the veterinary school in Makerere. One of the areas of research was on sleeping sickness. Okay, sleeping sickness comes in two forms. One is called Gambiensis, named after West Africa. it is very slow developing. The other one is East African. It is very fast developing. These two diseases are distinct in the way in which they can be treated. So when I was in Makerere, what I realized with my very good friend in the veterinary school was that the two diseases usually are in different regions. The regions where they were prevalent were beginning to merge. And there was a huge issue of how do we treat sleeping sickness in the region where you've got both? Because these are two, they're subspecies of one disease, but they're treated differently. So that was a huge thing. And I think I don't know what is happening today, but that was a very important thing that Makerere would be the top university to study sleeping sickness because of the convergence of the two subspecies of sleeping sickness. That was spearheaded by the veterinary school. Very good research in the veterinary school. I fell in love with the veterinary school. And then it led me to something. Much as I was teaching at the medical school, but the veterinary school led me to something. They invited a guy who was a Kenyan. He taught us about loop mediated isothermal amplification. It is called LAMP. That technique is used in medicine to detect DNA the same way in which PCR does. So loop mediated isothermal amplification is a variation, or let's say an alternative to PCR. I knew about that in Makerere around 2027, thereabout, 2008, 2007, 8. Okay, I was very, very struck by that. But that time, when I was in Makerere, I was actually working on Buruli ulcer. Buruli ulcer is this disease, because it's an ulcer. It was prevalent in Uganda around the early 60s, going into 70s, around the Nakasogola area, where a lot of these refugees were resident. And the reason I say that is the name Buruli is from Uganda. The name Buruli is from Uganda. They call it Buruli ulcer. But actually, the ulcer is caused unusually by a mycobacterium. It's called Mycobacterium ulcerans. Okay, so Mycobacterium ulcerans is the third most common mycobacterial disease after TB and leprosy. That thing caused an ulcer. But you know what? We don't have a big problem of that in Uganda anymore. There's a big problem in West Africa. There's a big problem in Congo, and there are cases in Southern Sudan. So all the years I was in Makerere between 2004 to 2008, I went to Geneva for a meeting every year on neglected tropical disease, because Buruli ulcer is one of the neglected tropical diseases. I went to all of those meetings. But for me, the important thing is this. When that Kenyan guy came to the veterinary school in Kenya and talked about LAMP, I thought to myself, Buruli ulcer is one of those diseases that are so difficult to diagnose because you need to do PCR. All those years ago, we didn't have PCR, not at the level of diagnostic or public healthcare service in Uganda. We didn't have it at that level. So I said, you know what? I think we need this. We need this. We need this. We need this lamp, because what I learned from the veterinary professors was, this is the best method you can use. You can take it to the field, because the difference between PCR and lamp is that PCR, you have to do it in a lab. You have to change the temperature several times. Lamp is done at one temperature, 60 degrees. You can put it water bath at 60 degrees. Once you know that is it, it will do it. And then you can have a clear color change. And then you know whether somebody has got that thing or not. And I thought, you know what? The best thing we should do for Buruli ulcer, which is the poor man's disease, is use lamp. I wrote a proposal. I think it was 2007. I wrote a proposal. It wasn't funded. Fast forward 2019 or early 2020, we had COVID. So I was told in my place of employment, we're going to have to not so much lay off people, but we've got to put you on, they call it furlough, because we can't come to work and mingle. But if our institute say, if you have a COVID project, let us know. We will put in the list of people who are essential, they call them essential employees. And then you can continue to do that project. So what I did was, I told them, yeah, I have an idea. I want to do LAMP for COVID. Because 15 years ago in Uganda, I was already working on that for Burundi also. And actually, the funny thing is, when my project was not funded in Uganda, I shared it with some people in West Africa. And within 2-3 years, somebody published an article on exactly what I was proposing from West Africa. And that is where we have to wake up. We have to fund research. The idea I had in Uganda around 2007, by 2010, thereabout, was already published somewhere in West Africa because I shared it, I was looking for funds. Somebody published it. And then when COVID came, I said the same to my organization. I said, okay, I want to do LAMP for COVID. And then they gave me the go ahead. What I did was, then I looked around. Did you know? I realized there was a company here in UK called Optigen. They were already working LAMP for COVID. And then Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State for Health, was already proposing that there is a 15-minute, 20-minute thereabouts PCR equivalent for COVID test. The company got back to me and said, actually, we're so advanced. We're so advanced with the LAMP for COVID that we don't need any collaborators. So you can imagine that is where I got. So 15 years ago, East Africa was many, many years ahead of Europe on LAMP for diagnostics. And when I raised the issue and I wanted to be part of it, they were not interested because they'd gone way ahead. And then one of the things I did was this. I spoke to the people in that company. I realized the person who was actually developing this project was a girl who did her PhD in East Africa. Because East Africa was years ahead of Europe in developing LAMP for veterinary applications. And so in many ways, I think that when our government listen and hear about this sort of experiences, we have to be very serious about funding science. Brains are not the remedy or the preserve of Europe. Brains are everywhere. And I'm not going to judge any part of the world. Brains are, opportunities are not. Our government fund. So if they do, we will be a powerhouse. And I want to share that with you.
If someone is interested in following the same path, of course, they can't follow your personal path because you didn't choose a lot of it. Some of these things just happened to you.
Absolutely.
But for example, some of the things, like I know someone who did an MSc in immunology. It's called and he's working in the NIH in the US. I made a video with him, which I've linked up here. You can go and watch it if you're interested, if you've missed it. But if someone is interested in doing this, working in the same field, what would be your advice?
My advice is this. After the pandemic, we've learned a lot of things, including the benefit that because students could not go to lectures, my son was attending lectures from home. Because we couldn't go to those meetings that people rub shoulders, we did it online. There are huge opportunities. So the universities must have departments that look for those opportunities where the curriculum they teach is covered elsewhere online. It will give huge opportunities for the students to add to the lectures they get. And I insist on the fact that we must use these online resources because we will never catch up with Europe in the way in which people can travel. And the other thing is this: we think of global warming. Why should we all be traveling all the time? So there is a reason we should travel. There is a lot you get out of meeting people face to face. But as long as we exhaust all the opportunities, we must not go there as the fun. We just don't have to have meetings with people travel around the world at a cheap cost to institutions that can't afford it. So my advice is this, and this is not so much, it's not even just today to government or to heads of institutions. My advice is to students, to scientists. These days, one of the things I do, give it a try. Go to ChatGPT, ask it a question in a field where you're very familiar, and then ask yourself, did it let you down? If it did, one of the things we need usually in research, for example, is you need to speak to somebody who's an expert in a field you are not. And these days, what I realize is when I hit that point where I need to ask somebody, I can ask ChatGPT. And you know what? More often than not, it gives me a useful beginning point of where I want to be, and I can gradually build up what I want to do. And we may be poor in terms of resources, but we're not poor in terms of ideas and vision. Yeah. And I want our young scientists and clinicians to always, because they're in that field, they know when ChatGPT spouts nonsense. And for that reason, use that as the beginning point. And actually, when you go to the next point where you realize you must talk to, or you have need of a visual surgical experience, yeah, you can go to that. But there are a lot of opportunities online that our institutions and individuals in various professions should use.
I love ChatGPT.
Yeah, I
Let
do
us
use.
let us know in the comments below. Do you use it? Do you know about it? I think what you've mentioned is really important, that it gives you a good starting point.
Yeah.
You have to use your own mind. You can't just copy and paste.
No, you should.
You use it like maybe talking to someone, helping you organize your work, or maybe giving you a different angle. So I think we have to make use of the resources we have available to us, especially us who are maybe back home where we have lower, they're called what do they call us? Low income, low income countries. But we have internet. The internet has opened the world. You've listened to this talk. If you're interested, you're able to get ideas of how you can do this thing. My next question is about funding. Like when I hear people who work in research, it sounds like you're always looking for funding, always looking for funding. Does it get stressful? Do you get used to it? If someone is trying to look into going into the research world, what's your advice about that funding issue? Constantly, they're looking for funding.
Okay, and you've touched a very important point there, because funding is not a given, and it depends on the jurisdiction you're in or the country you live in. I think in the past there are countries that actually literally, I mean, even now, I think countries have got different structures. There are countries which have got a certain level of funding for their national universities. So if you think about Uganda, if we chose that, the government can give some funding to all the government universities depending on the number of students they have. That structure is there. And I would really like that the government thinks of doing that. They may not afford it, but they have to think about it, because in the end, it can be very, very, very powerful. But the other option, which we had experienced here in the UK, is you apply for funds. There are a lot of government-funded funds, but the way in which you win or lose it is maybe something for another conversation. But you really, really, really have to fight for those funds. So there are a lot of people whose position as maybe a chair, which a chair is a professorship named after something. All of those positions are dependent on you continuing to have a research rating. The research rating is the number of publications you have, the amount of grant you generate for the university. So for all of those reasons, it is not as easy as somebody, let's say, for want of a better example, let's say a lecturer of biochemistry in Makerere is going to be a lecturer of biochemistry in Makerere for all the years until they are retired or whatever. But here, if you got a chair, for example, you're a professor of chemistry, Hill University or whatever, there are very strict regulations. The research rating is so important. It stresses them out. Let's be very honest. It stresses them out. And if you don't perform well, there are risks to your position. So I don't want to find a point to it that people struggle. And I think I would rather be in a situation where I'm in an institution would commit through the government, maybe like 2 PhDs and 3 master students under my care, and I will always have that. But I will not have the opportunity and the option to apply for grants beyond that, because the more grants I bring in, the bigger my group is. I think that uncertainty, that fear of being relegated, does do a lot of harm to academics, and it's something that I don't want for our. I think we should take a different path. At the moment, most of our lecturers, for example, once they're lecturers, they're there, but the productivity is a different thing. I think we need a different formula to make them more productive. I don't think we've got there yet.
It sounds like when you came back to the UK, you still go to Uganda quite a lot. Even I was looking online, and you have articles that you have in the Ugandan newspapers. One of them was about DNA. How do you balance going to Uganda and being here? And how do you do it?
Yeah. So for me, the good thing is I thank God that we managed a few years in Uganda as a family. But actually now, and this is something that I don't know what you think about it, but I've had this problem where when I'm at home, and I'm talking to my siblings, occasionally I catch myself saying, Amarile. So I'm a Madi. I'm a Madi. So in Madi, Amarile means where I come from or at our place. It is a reference to your home. And when I'm talking to my siblings, every so often I find myself saying Amarile. And when I say that, I'm referring to London. I'm referring to the things that happen in London. But when I say that, I cringe because suddenly I realize I'm talking to my siblings and I'm telling them about a different place, which is so. So I got that conflict, and the way I resolve it is I always say that you know what, I'm married. I'm married to two cultures. The culture I'm born in that I cannot ever reject. The culture I've grown into that I actually also absorb. And I call myself a cultural polygamist. That is a phrase I use and proudly so because the thing is this we have different cultures and you think about it even in terms of food. I've had to introduce my wife to our food. And you know what they say here in the UK? The things you don't know but you gradually get to like, they say it's an acquired taste. Okay? So there is the culture you're born into, and there's the culture you grow into, the acquired taste. There are two cultures in my life. The Western culture and the thing is this, actually to be honest, they are not so far apart, but there are aspects of being a Ugandan, being an let's say an English stroke Irish person that are not too disparate. There are a lot of things that are common, but you come down to things like the way in which you express reverence to somebody, whether you curtsy or you shake hands or you make a phone call. All of those things are different, but they are trivial because they are the external aspects of the deeper feeling. The deeper feelings are identical, and but externally we do things differently. So I call myself a cultural polygamist, and I'm happy with that because the thing is that I've got two cultures: the Ugandan culture, which I can never reject. I was born into that, and the UK stroke Irish culture, which I've married into, which I can never reject because my children have both, and God knows what they will tell you the day you interview them.
I would love to interview them and find out what is their perspective. So I think that's so important. I think a lot of people who have been here for so many years, they keep saying, even me, I keep saying back home, back home. We keep saying back home, and we mean Uganda.
Yeah,
But then when I went to Uganda and then my kids were asking me for something, I told them when we go back home.
and that's lost. You've lost it there because back home for them is UK.
Yes, exactly. So I think we don't have to choose. We
Yeah,
can as well take up both, like you've said. Let us all be cultural polygamists.
yeah.
One more question in terms of, let's say, investing, and because sometimes people they decide to take all their money back home, whereby they're in Uganda. What would be your advice? Let's say if someone is considering buying a house, would you recommend they do it here? Should they like what would you say?
Okay. Here is my advice because I've been there. I've been there probably. But the thing I would say is this: have a home in the UK that you can live. A small home. Because before you realize it, children will grow up and fly them. Have a small home. At at let, Make it a two-bedroom house. If at one point in the journey of the family there is need for a third bedroom, make the living room a third bedroom. Have a two-bedroom house because that is the house that when you turn 60 and nobody is going to give you a mortgage, you live in. The children will have grown and will be working in Scotland, Manchester, God knows where else. Make so the security for a Ugandan couple in London. I'm talking about London, but that is true for other big cities, Birmingham, and Manchester. The security for a Ugandan couple as parents is have a very small home that you're happy to live in. Because when the kids leave you, you've paid the mortgage, you're living it. But if you can, invest in another home at home, as home Uganda. Because the thing is, over time, you'll find that there's a lot of goods in a life at home. And if you find for health or any other reason, and it could include professional and actually or it could even be a business interest. If for all of those reasons you have to migrate to Uganda, the house you live in London, Birmingham, or Manchester is either going to be the home for your children who have to help you, or it will be a rental that will fund your business interest in Uganda. That will be my
Thank you so much. I feel like I've really benefited so much by this conversation, and I really. Is there any, like, if someone wants to get in touch with you, are they able to? Where can they find you?
Yeah. At the moment, I'm working at the Griffith Institute in Harrow, Northwick Park Hospital. I may move, but I have an affiliation with University College London. I'm an honorary lecturer at University College London. So those are my affiliations. But I think, other than my Gmail account, which will be there for posterity, if anybody is keen to get in touch with me, they use my Gmail account or come to me, because the institutions, my relationship with the institutions can change over time. But I think the best thing is my Gmail account. I have no hesitation to share it, or through you.
Yes, please. If you have any questions for him, you want to get in touch with him, you can contact me via my email that's on my YouTube channel, my Instagram, and I will connect you. And thank you so much. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to watch more videos from me, make sure you subscribe. Any parting words for us?
No, I have a great respect for our people. And the thing is this, what I miss is that there's not enough of them who know where we could be the way I realized in the later years of my life. So that's the thing I'm going to share with I always share with my children, but I want to give all the children. And through your channel, I think there's an opportunity. Never, never let yourself down, because with endless opportunities. And if there's something that you're not so sure what I meant, get back in touch, and I'll see you. You take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.